Alright, so today we're going to make an ugly naked guy hobo bag. I'm making the small size and I'm making a few adjustments. So the first adjustment that I'm making, I did not want the seam. Normally there's a seam that runs directly up the middle, the front center and the back center. So I am using an old t-shirt. This bag is for myself, and this is my favorite t-shirt, and it is worn out, so I'm going to turn it into a bag. So first I fused, since this is a stretchy fabric, since it's t-shirt material, I fused it's from Barb's Bags, woven fused onto the back, just one layer of that because it's pretty thick. Otherwise I would use 2 layers of Shape Flex since it's thinner. And then what I did to cut these pieces out, from the small front center top, the small front center bottom, and the small back center panel, I trimmed 1/2 inch off the center, since that would be the seam allowance. So I trimmed 1/2 inch off each of those pieces, and then I cut on the fold. So now it's the right width, and we will eliminate the seam down the center, front, and back of the bag. So that's the first change that I made. And then the next change is going to be that this bag will have a recessed zipper. So in addition to what you need to cut already, I also cut 4 zipper panel pieces, and I cut these 1.5 inches wide by 11 inches long. And then everything else I cut the same. I'm using for my lining on this a waterproof canvas, so I don't need to interface it. That's really why I'm using it, because I didn't want to interface. And I like, it gives your bag a nice weight, and it kind of gives it structure without using extra interfacing. So if you want to change to that, you could use waterproof canvas. If you're using regular woven, like quilting cotton for your lining, then you would also want to cut 1 piece of woven interfacing for each of the zipper panels and fuse that to the back. Alright, so we're going to get started with the exterior of the bag first. I'm going to be using, instead of making straps and strap connectors, I'm going to be using this webbing that I have from SoHungryHippie.com. I will link that below. This is actually 1 1/4 inch wide webbing that I had left over from making my Tribbiani traveler bags. And I only have 1 inch wide hardware, so probably not ideal, but I think it's not that bad. And like I said, this bag's for myself, so I don't care. I mean, it'll look like that. I don't care. It's fine. It was either that or not make this today, or use a different color hardware, and I really wanted this nickel hardware. So my hardware is from moremeknow.com. So first thing I'm going to do is just baste my I'm going to baste the bottom of my connectors around the rectangle ring. And I already, after I cut the connectors out of the webbing, I like super saturated the ends of it with Fray Check, because I don't have a lighter handy. So otherwise you typically, I mean, I wouldn't use a lighter on it now because I'm pretty sure Fray Check is flammable, but otherwise I would normally use a lighter and melt the ends so that it doesn't fray. So I'm hopeful that Fray Check will be sufficient. So I guess that doesn't look too bad, right? I'd rather have too small of hardware than too big, maybe? I don't know. Whatever. It's mine. I don't mind. Okay, so the next step, we're going to sew. We are skipping step. That was step 1, was folding the connectors. Normally you'd fold it as the directions show. So we're skipping step 2 and 3 since we don't have to sew those panels together since we cut on a fold. And then we're skipping to step 4. So we're going to sew 2 side panels together along the long edge with a curve. So let me go ahead and move some of this out of the way. Just keep my side panels here. So I had to do a little bit of creative cutting to make the t-shirt work. It was parts of it were a little bit less fabric than I needed, but I figured that was in the seam allowance, so it wouldn't matter. Okay, so let's see. I want these to be my front of the bag side panels, and then these are the back. So make sure you put a back and a front together when you do this. So I'm just placing those right sides together, matching up the long edge that has the curve at the bottom. I'll do that with both. Place a few clips in here so that it stays together. All right, and then I'm just going to sew this together using a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Repeat with the other side. I'm using kind of a contrast thread, which I don't usually do either, but again, this bag's for me, so whatever I want goes, right? Alright, and you can trim seam allowances down as you go if you choose. Right now I'm going to go press the seam allowance open, and then we'll come back and top stitch it. Alright, so the end will curve up a little bit because there is that curve in the seam, so when you press it, it won't press flat. And now we're just going to top stitch down each side of the seam using a 1/8 inch seam allowance. And hopefully, I started out here with I had a little partial bobbin with this color on it already, so I figured I'd use that up first, so I'm sure it'll run out right now while I'm top stitching. I made it down one side. And a lot of this top stitching is really more decorative than anything else. I guess there was more thread on this bobbin than I thought. Oh man, I don't know why I just did that. Alright, so now we're going to make our front pocket. So, I have my exterior, front, center, bottom, right side up. Place the 8-inch zipper, 9-inch total length if you're using zipper tape. So mine is zipper tape and I cut it at 9 inches. This zipper tape is from moremeknow.com. Her Facebook group is so whatever, so I always want to say so whatever.com, but when you go to that, it is totally something else. Alright, so I'm just going to clip this on all the way along the top. And now I'm going to sew it in place, and I'm using a 1/4 inch seam allowance right now. Now place one front pocket lining panel right side down on top, so they're right sides together, zipper sandwiched in between. And now, since I am using a 1 1/4 inch wide zipper, I'm going to sew this next seam using a 3/8 inch seam allowance. If you're using a 1 inch wide zipper, then you would use a 1/4 inch seam allowance, and that's important for the panel to come out the right size for the bag. So 3/8 inch seam allowance. So now I want to press the front pocket lining and the front center bottom wrong sides together and away from the zipper. So I'm going to carefully press this. I think it's okay to press waterproof canvas from the right side, but this side, if you touch your iron to it, will melt. Alright, now we're going to top stitch this using a 1/8 inch seam allowance below the zipper. And I'm just making sure that everything is evenly pulled away from the zipper, and I'll continue to pull them apart as I sew. If you just heard my chair squeaking, I did finally get a new chair that I went to the store and bought. I didn't wait for the one from Amazon that never showed up, but I didn't think to bring it out here, so it's just at my computer right now. All right. All right, we're going to do this in one step. So let me first kind of pin this in place. So I'm going to pin the zipper right sides together. Okay, I'm sorry. The other pocket lining panel is right sides together with the pocket lining panel that's already attached. So I'm just pinning together or clipping together along the top of the zipper. And then I'm going to place the front center top right side down and match the long straight edge up with the top of the zipper and the top of the pocket lining panel. Okay, and now I'm going to sew this whole sandwich here together using a 3/8 inch seam allowance. If your zipper is 1 inch wide, you'll use a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Just move your zipper pull out of the way as you go. So I'm going to press both of these up and away from the zipper so they are wrong sides together. Alright, now I'm going to top stitch through this part using a 1/8 of an inch seam allowance again. Nope, I do want it this way. I always like to typically top stitch along the right side of my presser foot. I don't know if that's the right way or if there is a right way, but that's the way that I like to do it. Now, flip this over, press the top front pocket lining down so that it's right sides together with the other front pocket lining. We're going to trim, I'm going to actually clip the sides together so that I don't mess this up. Alright, so the first pocket lining panel that we attached is wider or longer because of the sewing, the way we sew the other one to the zipper. So we're just trimming the longer one to be even with the shorter one. And then we're just going to sew together along the bottom of the two pocket panels using a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Now we're going to baste the sides. So I'm going to make sure that everything's laying nice and flat and clip together through the exterior and the pocket lining panels. And then I'm just going to baste this together using a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Alright, so now we're going to attach everything for the exterior. Alright, so first I want this side panel. So I'm placing this on top, right sides together. And I'm just going to clip all the way down the match side. All right, and then I'm going to sew that together using a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Alright, now I'm pressing the seam allowance, pressing the side panel away from the front center panel and pressing the seam allowance toward the side panel. Alright, now we're going to top stitch along that seam using a 1/8 inch seam allowance. We're going to attach the other assembled side panel to the other side of the front center now. You can see how I haven't made this bag in a while and I have to follow along with the directions. I have to read them. I almost was going to make it without pulling the pattern up, but I think I would have probably not gone in the same order, so. And then again a 1/2 inch seam allowance here. going to press this side panel away from the front. Right now we're going to top stitch here using a 1/8 inch seam allowance. And then if you choose to, after top stitching these panels, you can go ahead and cut the additional seam allowance away from behind. That can help to reduce some of the bulk if your machine can't handle it, or if you want, I don't know. I typically leave it on this bag. Alright, we're going to baste our handle connectors on at this point. So you just want it centered at the top of each side panel. And I'm just basting it in place using a 1/4 inch seam allowance. And then I'll repeat on the other side. Now we are going to place the back center right sides together with one of the side panels that's attached to the front, and I'm going to match up one long side, and I'm just clipping this together all the way along that side, or pinning. We'll sew this together using a 1/2 inch seam allowance again. We'll press this seam allowance toward the side panel. Alright, and then we'll top stitch this using an 1/8 inch seam allowance. And then we're finally going to match up the last side seam. It's a little bit trickier since it doesn't lay completely flat because the side panels have that curve to them. Alright, and now I'm going to sew this one together using 1/2 inch seam allowance again. Alright, now this one will be the trickiest to top stitch because it's inside of a tube now, but we're going to press that seam allowance toward the side panel also. Alright, and then top stitch that one using a 1/8 inch seam allowance. Just a little bit trickier, so just take your time. And you have to kind of move the bag out of the way as you go, because now you're sewing kind of inside of a bag tube. I always do my adjusting with the needle down. So now we're on to step number 18. We're going to install the oval base onto the exterior, which I know a lot of people said that they don't like sewing round bottoms in. So let's see, I have my bottom is also cut out of the same t-shirt fabric. I'm going to use my pattern piece to mark the centers on each of the narrow ends. And then I already have the center marked on the right side of my exterior because I traced the pattern piece onto that. So you shouldn't, normally you wouldn't have to mark the centers on the front and back because there would be a seam there. There is no seam because I cut it on the fold. So we're just going to mark the center. And I'm on the right side of the fabric, but I'm making sure I'm within the seam allowance. And then on the front as well. Or you can put a little snip with your scissors. Just make sure it's like only 1/4 of an inch in or so, or less. Alright, so to start this out, first I'm going to match the center of the front. Let's see, I want this side in the front. I'll match the front center of the bag with the center along one long side of the bottom panel. And I'll clip right there. And then I'm going to place a couple other clips on either side of it to hold that in place. And then repeat on the other side, matching up the center of the long side of the bottom panel to the center on the back panel of my bag. Alright, now I'm going to match the center of the short ends up, and the bottom panel should slide right in there so that the bag panels are going kind of around the bottom panel. The stabilizer will help you to slide it in there. Yeah. So if you see how you have to ease around the corner, so the edge of the fabric on the base panel is not going to lay flat. because the outside edges of the base panel are not the same size as the outer edge of the exterior panels. But it is the same size at the seam line, which is 1/2 inch in from the edge. So I say that over and over again. And I think that's just what easing is, easing around the corners of anything you're sewing. When you're sewing curves, that they're not going to fit together flat. And then I also like to sew them on using my zipper foot, because I can get right up next to the stabilizer. Alright, so I'm just going to take my time and use a 1/2 inch seam allowance and sew all the way around the space. And like always, I like to put my left hand inside the bag, and that just helps me to keep everything from shifting. And I actually like lift the bag up so that the body of the bag is parallel with the surface, laying flat on the surface, but the base of the bag is standing upright, perpendicular to the surface. And I'm just sewing right next to the stabilizer, but not through it. You can kind of use the stabilizer as a guide of sorts to make sure that you keep your bottom even. And I lift the foot up and adjust often, always with my needle in the down position. backstitch when you get back to where you started. Alright, and then I'm going to take a look at this from inside the bag, so the right side, just to make sure that I don't have any weird puckering or anything in my seam line, and I don't. Looks good. Maybe I shouldn't have used light blue thread because you can see it, but that's fine, because again, this is my bag and I don't care. So I'm going to trim the seam allowance down now to about 1/4 of an inch. So that was pretty quick. We're going to set this aside and now we'll assemble the lining. So first we're going to install the interior zipper pocket, and then we'll do the recessed zipper parts. So let's see, I need one lining panel. And I need one interior zipper pocket panel start with, and we want to place these right sides together. And I'm going to want to center this, so I'm just kind of pressing them in half to mark the centers now. And I'm going to actually switch out to black thread also. And I think I'm going to line this up with the bottom of my bag here so that I have the room I need to do the recessed pocket. So where's my ruler? Okay, I'm going to use my ruler to go ahead and measure, let's see, my interior zipper pocket is 12 inches wide, so I want to measure a box that's 10 inches wide and 1 inch down from the top of the interior zipper pocket. And then I'm going to slide the ruler down so that I'm 1/2 inch below the original line, and draw a second line, also 10 inches long. And now I'll draw one vertical line on the end of each line to draw a box. Alright, so right sides together. Normally I would pin this in place, and I'm not going to, so hopefully I don't regret it. Sewing all the way around this box. My needle is so super loud sewing through this waterproof canvas. You reach the other side of the box, rotate. and I normally don't use number 5 zippers for my interior zipper pockets. I normally use a number 3 zipper, but I'm using a number 5 zipper on this one. Alright, so now you want to mark a line directly down the center of this box. And you want to make sure that it stops about 1/2 inch from the ends of the box, and then you'll draw a line to each corner. So now I want to cut along that line through both layers. And then when you reach the triangle at the end, you'll cut to each of those corners. Just be very careful not to cut through your stitching, but get as close to it as you can. Okay. Now I'm going to press this, flip it through the pocket, through the hole so that it's wrong sides together, and then I'm going to press it flat. Alright, so I don't usually have an issue with zipper pockets, but interior zipper pockets like this, sewn out of waterproof canvas, are not the easiest for me. So, did my best to press this flat. I'm going to use double-sided tape to hold the zipper in place because there's no way it's going to stay otherwise. So I'm just going to put this down the very edge of my zipper. And again, like I said before, I don't usually use number 5 zippers for interior zipper pockets, but I am this time. What did I do with my fabric snips? Or my thread snips? Alright, now go down this side. Alright, hopefully this helps me to get it in place right. I'm going to peel off one side at a time. And I kind of made my zipper longer than necessary. Let's see. So I think I got the bottom edge a little bit straighter pressing it. Alright, hopefully nobody's watching this laughing at me right now. Maybe there's like a way easier way to do this that I don't know about with waterproof canvas. Alright, so the bottom is stuck in place. Alright, I'm gonna kind of Is this a dumb idea to sew it first? Yeah. Oh boy. All right, we'll just hope for the best, right? All right, use a longer stitch length. I'm just going to start here, and I'm using a 1/8 inch seam allowance. If you feel like you need to readjust anything, just do it before you sew it. That's probably a good thing that I'm using coordinating thread on the lining. That's all I'll say. More stitch. I was going to try to turn too soon. Alright, so probably not my best work, but it's my bag, so it doesn't matter. Alright. That has to be the worst part of it, right? I think so. Now, actually, that zipper looks kind of pretty in there. Alright, so now we're on step number 24. I'm going to take the other lining pocket and place it right sides together with the one that's attached to the bag. I'm going to clip these together. We're going to leave the bottom open. And I'm just pinning up both sides and across the top. we're using a 1/2 inch seam allowance, and I'm just folding the lining main panel back out of the way as I sew. I'm just sewing right over the zipper ends, and then I'll trim those off. Alright, and then I'm actually going to trim down the whole entire seam allowance around the zipper pocket. And that makes it easier to close the hole in the bottom after you're done, after you turn the bag right side out. And I'm folding the lining panel back out of the way as I do this, and I did also trim down my zipper ends. Alright, so now we're going to construct our, let's make the top zipper. So I need my zipper panels. Alright, so I have 4 zipper panels that I cut, and again, these are 11 inches long and 1.5 inches wide. Right now I'm just going to place double-sided tape along the end of each of these so that I can fold back 1/4 inch, and it will stick down. Since this is waterproof canvas, I can't really, I mean, I can iron it, but it doesn't stay when you iron it, so. And my double-sided tape is 1/4 inch wide, so I can just easily fold it over 1/4 inch because it will be just as wide as the tape. Alright, so now I'm just going to remove the backing and fold that 1/4 inch that is covered in tape down toward the wrong side on each end of each of the zipper panels. my best to be even about this. One more. All right. So each end of each of the zipper panels is folded to the wrong side by 1/4 of an inch. This one's a little bit extra, so I'm going to fix that. They all do need to be the same length, so try to be precise. I'm just going to double check real quick to make sure that they're all the right length. I don't usually just wing it. Okay, that's good enough. All right, so right now I'm going to open up the end of the zipper, and I want to fold the end back on itself at a 90-degree angle toward the back side of the zipper. So it's just extended past the end, and I'm just going to put a few stitches in the zipper to hold the end back in place. And I'm going to repeat that on the other side and make sure that I fold it back the same amount so that my zippers match on each side. So I just bought a magnet to hold my snips in place from moremeknow.com. It says "Not today, Bobbin," and this magnet on here is like insanely strong, so it's awesome. I had a cheap magnet up there before, and my snips would sometimes fall. So if you're in need of something like that, check out moremeknow.com. That's also where I get my zippers, zipper pulls. Zippers she doesn't always have, but when she stocks them, she stocks a lot. And a lot of varieties, and they're pre-cut, pre-packaged, so you don't have to figure out like which colors you want. I just buy multiple packages, get all the colors. That way, no matter what you're making, you're ready to go. All right, so now I'm going to place the zipper panel right side down on the right side of my zipper, and I'm just clipping all the way along the edge, and I have the folded back edge. I want that to be back far enough that it's away from that 1/4 inch seam allowance part that's folded back. So I'm going to readjust that. Should have started clipping it together from that end, I guess. Alright, so then you can baste this in place if you want, just using a 1/4 inch seam allowance, or I'm just going to go ahead and put both on at once. I don't know if this will really save me time or cost me time because I'll mess it up, because I should have taken the time to do it the right way. But so I have 2 zipper panels right sides together with a zipper sandwiched in between. All right, and then I'm going to sew this together using probably, I'm just going to use I'm going to use 3/8 inch seam allowance. So all right, and I'm just starting from at one end of the zipper panels, back stitch, so over my folded edge of my zipper, make sure trim all the threads. All right, now we want to press these panels wrong sides together and away from the zipper. But I'm not even going to press them because they won't press that well because they're waterproof canvas. So I'm just going to pull them away from the zipper and clip them together. All right, and I'm just really pulling it away from the zipper. That seems to be holding. All right, so now I'm going to start at one end, matching up the 2 folded back edges using my long top stitching stitch length and a 1/8 inch seam allowance. So I'm just going to sew along those ends first toward the zipper, stop at about 1/8 of an inch away from the zipper and rotate, and then I'm just going to top stitch using 1/8 of an inch seam allowance all the way down the length of the zipper. And I hope I don't run out of bottom thread. Stop when I get 1/8 of an inch from the other end. All right, and then just baste the open ends together. Also using about 1/8 of an inch seam allowance because this is only going to get sewn at 1/4 of an inch seam allowance into the lining. Repeat the same process on the other side. First I'm going to kind of clip some of this in place with it zipped up so that I can make sure that my panels are even. And then I will unzip it before I sew it on. Just make sure you don't pull your zipper all the way off the end. Your zipper pull all the way off the end, even though you can put it back on. So all right, and make sure the zipper stays folded back in itself the right way. All right, and then I'm just going to sew this together, again using a 3/8 inch seam allowance. And I do make sure that I don't sew beyond the end of the zipper panels onto the zipper, because that will show. Now I'm just folding my zipper panels wrong sides together and away from the zipper. And I'm just going to clip it together all the way down the open sides. Alright, and now this one we're going to start sewing it together at this end. You know what though, it's fine. Everything's fine. Alright, 1/8 inch seam allowance. First sew down that first short edge. Turn with my needle down. stop 1/8 of an inch from the end, turn, and sew down this short end. And then sew the base of the open ends together, also using an 1/8 inch seam allowance. I'm hoping that making these 11 inches long was not too long. I think it should be okay. All right, now to attach this to the bag. Let's see, I want to measure, I think 1 inch down from the center. So I don't want it to be like super recessed. So I'm just going to kind of line this up so it's even at the top edges. So it's about 2.5 inches down from the top corner, and just over 1 inch from the center. And I'm going to, I'm just going to draw a line and then I'll cut it with my scissors. I would normally just cut this with my rotary cutter. And then I'm going to repeat that with this side. So it was 2.5 inches down from the top corners. This one's not quite as flat since I put that zipper pocket in it. And just over 1 inch down from the center. Draw a line. Okay, so now we want to mark the centers of these top strips. All right, and then I want to mark the center of the bottom portion. And then I want to find and mark the center of my zipper panel. So I'm actually going to measure that. So, let's find the top of the other side. We'll just do the centers of everything at once. And the center of this. And the curved sides are the bottom edge. So, oh, that was not the center. Yes, it was. Okay. So let's see. I'm going to move this out of my way. So first I want the bottom panel right side up. I'm going to place the zipper panel right side on top, matching the centers. I'm going to clip this together. And I have this, the zippers are going the same direction, so that way all my zippers open from the left to the right. So if you're left-handed, you might want it the other way. And now I'm going to place the top portion right side down on top and matching the centers again. And then pin this together all the way across the top. And although this seems like it will make your lining not fit right, that it'll be too short, we're only using a 1/4 inch seam allowance, so it doesn't really take off that much, and it should still fit fine. If you've made the Joey tote bag, it's the same way that we do the lining for that. We just cut the top off and it fits together okay. All right. So now I'm just going to sew all of this together using a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Just make sure that your zipper panel is in the seam the whole time and that nothing shifts apart. You can baste it to the bottom portion of the lining first if you want, and then sew the top strip on to make sure that nothing moves. But I'm honestly like super close to being out of thread, so I'm trying my best to make it last. Okay, and now we're going to press the top portion away from the zipper, and the seam allowance is also pressed up, and I'm going to top stitch this using an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. And I'll just continually pull that up away from the zipper as I go. We'll repeat that on the other side. So first I'm going to line up the center marks of the zipper panel with the bottom portion of the lining. And then place the top portion right side down, matching the centers, and pin all the way along the top, or clip. And I'm not going to make a zipper tab for the end of my zipper. I have metal zipper ends, also from moremeknow.com. And I'm just gonna put one of those on. It's rainbow hardware, and I totally used black nickel, but I think it'll be fine. Or gunmetal, I don't know what she calls this, gunmetal or black nickel, but. All right, and I'm using a 1/4 inch seam allowance. then again, we're going to top stitch this, pulling the top portion of the lining up and away from the zipper panels. Oh. That's something wrinkled up here. Okay. Finally, now we'll install the zipper end last. So now just want to match up these sides. Alright, and I'm just going to sew this together using a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Or you can use a 5/8 even to help the lining fit more snugly. Making sure that the end of my zipper is out of the way. Every time I sew lately, my neck hurts really bad. Alright, I'm going to trim the seam allowance down. Probably to just under 1/4 inch, I think I'm using. Or cutting it to just under 1/4 inch. Alright, and then next up is marking the centers. So I don't need to mark the center along the sides because the seam is there. I want to make sure, okay, first let me do this. I'm going to unzip my inside pocket right now so that I don't forget. And then I want to kind of make sure that this stays out of the way And I already have my center marked on the one side, so I'm just going to use that to mark the center on the other side. Alright, and then you want to mark the centers on the bottom of the lining base panel, or bottom panel, or whatever I call it. And you can use the pattern piece to do this if you choose. Alright, so now I'm going to place this right sides together inside the lining. Match up first the center marks on the long edges and place a few clips there, and then I'll flip it over and match up the center marks on the other side of the long sides. And I'm matching up my centers. And then I want to match up the short centers, which would be just matched up with the side seam. And then ease around the corners. And again, the edge of your fabric will wrinkle up because the edges are not going to match. They're not the same length, it's the same length at the seam line. So 1/2 inch in from the edge where the seam allowance is the part that matches. A lot of people staple oval bottoms in so that they don't shift while they sew. If you do that, then that's fine. Go ahead and staple it. You just staple within the seam allowance, and then after you're done, you trim those staples off. I have never personally used staples. I mean, I get the appeal. It sounds like a good idea. I just have not done it. So I just use a lot of clips. So make sure that your interior zipper pocket is folded back out of the way, and you're using a 1/2 inch seam allowance. I did not change out my presser clip this time, so. And I also find it helpful to, instead of removing the clip completely, scoot it out to the very edge so it's still holding the fabric together until I sew past that part, and then I'll remove it. And I always lift the whole bag up to go around the corners. So hopefully that's helpful to anybody that's having problems with oval bottoms. I've always preferred rounded bottoms over squared bottoms, which actually makes me think that I don't have that many patterns that have a square bottom, so I'll have to add a few more corner bottoms. lift my presser foot up often to adjust the fabric, adjust the direction I'm stitching in. I hand crank to put things where I want them, make sure everything stays lined up. So I think a key part of it is just taking your time. So our interior is done. I'm going to go ahead and install the zipper end right now. Those are sealed in there nicely. Don't tell anybody that I just cut that with my fabric scissors. I need new scissors anyway if it's any difference. I cut over a pin or something. What the heck? So one of those and one screw. Let me I got my tiny little screwdriver, so yes. Alright, and I have some Gutermann glue. As long as it's not dried up, I'm going to squeeze it down inside here. I think it is dried up. Darn it. Alright, so no glue. I can always take this back off later and put glue on it. I just want to make sure that I have this on here evenly. That looks decent. Okay. And I will absolutely get some glue down in there later, but alright, I just tighten that up really well. Make sure that it looks decent from the right side. Plus it's going to be like tucked down inside my bag, so it doesn't really matter. Alright, so my zippers are all unzipped. I am going to trim the bottom seam allowance down to probably just shy of 1/4 of an inch. Just be careful not to trim through your stitching. Okay, so now we're skipping a lot of steps, like 27, 28, 29. We've skipped all those. So I'm going to turn the lining right side out now. Unzip my zipper. Alright, so I want, let's see, my zipper pocket's on this side, and I want that to be on the back side of my bag. So the zipper pocket on the outside will not be against the zipper pocket on the lining. Push that down inside the exterior. Press the end, or push the end of the zipper down in between. Alright, so right now I'm just matching up the side seams, which this side is going to be pretty thick through that webbing I used. So hopefully my machine doesn't give me a problem. Because we all saw on the Rossitron video that my machine does not like thickness. So I'm just going to place a couple clips at the end here. Alright, and then at the other end, I'm going to do the same. I'm matching up my centers, and I'm just kind of finger pressing that seam allowance open. I should actually put my clips this way because I'm going to be sewing it from the lining side. And I think, so normally I would use a 3/8 inch seam allowance around the top, and I'm still going to do that even though we don't have a zipper in that seam now, just because the zipper panels are not that far down from the top edge, and that way I'll still have room to top stitch after I turn it right side out. So I'm just pinning all the way around. Alright, now I'm just going to sew this together using a 3/8 inch seam allowance. Hopefully I don't run out of thread here. Alright, and then I'll rotate to sew straight across the ends, hopefully. Hopefully I don't break a needle. I'm using a really large needle though too, so hopefully that helps. It's a size, a 20. And surprisingly that was fine. Nope, until I try to backstitch. What's my rule? Always stop with my needle down. I should probably take my own advice. Alright, let's see, I'm not going to trim that seam allowance down, I don't think. Nah, I'm not gonna. I am going to sew one more time over my end, my strap connectors. Since I couldn't backstitch. Trying to, if I backstitch over thick areas, I break my needle like every time. And I think somebody said something about getting a heavy duty sewing or heavy duty plate. And I wonder if that would help me. I think that's part of my problem is because there's this tiny hole. I literally just ran out of bobbin thread. How perfect. There's a tiny hole that the needle goes into. A needle plate, I think that's what that's called. And if I sew through thick things, it like moves it and it doesn't come out the right spot on the other side, and it goes into the feed dogs. Alright, so we're going to turn this right side out through the open pocket. And that's why we don't sew the bottom. Alright, and right now I'm just going to push my lining, my zipper pocket inside so that it's out of the way. my bag a good press, and then we'll top stitch it. Alright, I pressed the top seam really well, and then I just turned my bag inside out because I always top stitch my bag inside out so it's flat on my bed of my sewing machine. I'm just going to start top stitching kind of near the side. I'm on the back of the bag. I don't know, I just pick a spot that's kind of out of the way in case your back stitch looks a little bit funky. Alright, and then I'm just going to take my time and top stitch. O-rings would have been a nice alternative to rectangle rings on this bag. Hope for the best going across these connectors where it's a little bit thicker. I'm just hand cranking these thick spots since my machine does not like it. And this is the Juki DDL 8700. And main reason why I would like to upgrade, I guess, this machine definitely, it's better. It sews through more than I could on my domestic, for sure. It's been a great machine, but it definitely has its limitations, especially when it comes to anything thick. I can sew through several layers of vinyl without a problem, as long as I don't backstitch. Leather is not that great on this bag. Thin leathers are fine. After some hunting, I did find leather needles that fit, but it's definitely not made to sew leather, which I didn't think it was. They don't tell you that it is. I mean, it says that it's for lightweight sewing, and that I find that to be true. Not super lightweight, because if you just sew like uninterfaced cotton, this machine doesn't like that. It kind of sucks it into the feed dogs and chews it up. So yeah. Alright, I'm going to hand crank across this connector as well, especially over the center. I think the center of it, I have the seam allowance there from the side panels, and it's just really thick. So let's turn this back right side. I need to sew my pocket closed, and I need to add my handle. So I So we're just going to top stitch that closed using an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Tuck that back down inside the pocket. Oh, and I actually got this t-shirt from a concert in Toledo, Ohio. This was in 2016. I think it was at the Huntington Center or something. So there we have our interior zipper pocket and our recess zipper. And I think that actually worked out to be the perfect length for the zipper panels. So that the outside of the bag still holds its shape and that the ends aren't too squeezed together. So, and then the last step will just be to add the handle. Alright, which again I already cut this, and I already used fray check on the ends because I don't have a lighter out here. And I'm just right now folding this to the back. And I'm just going to top stitch it on, or stitch it on with a couple lines of stitching, but I need to switch out to black thread, and I also am going to change my needle after going through some of those thick parts. So I'll do this off camera. But there's the main idea, and you get a recessed zipper pocket, a recessed zipper panel, and a nice slouchy hobo bag, and it's a good way to use up or to make your old favorite t-shirt into your new favorite bag. So I think it looks pretty cool. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you'll make a recessed zipper ugly naked guy hobo bag.